classification on the basis of variability slash behavior. You can have three columns: fixed cost, variable cost, semi-variable cost. Fixed, variable and semi-variable. Fixed, variable and semi-variable cost. Fixed cost do not change with volume, and remains constant. Do not change with volume and remains constant. Do not change with volume and remains constant. Variable cost changes with the change in output. Changes with the change in output. Changes with the change in output. Semi-variable cost includes a fixed as well as variable component. Includes a fixed as well as variable component. Fixed as well as a variable component. Fixed cost per unit is inversely proportional with volume. Fixed cost per unit is inversely proportional with volume. Inversely proportional with volume. Variable cost per unit remains constant. Variable cost per unit remains constant. The variable cost at a per unit level will remain constant. Semi-variable cost per unit, variable cost per unit will not remain constant. Will not remain constant. We'll first complete full notes and then I'll explain again. Semi-variable cost per unit will not remain constant. Total fixed cost remains constant irrespective of volume. Total fixed cost remains constant irrespective of volume. Irrespective of volume. Total variable cost is directly proportional with volume. Total variable cost is directly proportional with volume. Is directly proportional with volume. Total semi-variable cost does not remain constant. Total semi-variable cost does not remain constant. Now this part remains constant, that is variable cost per unit remains constant, and this part also remains constant, your fixed cost at the overall level. So a problem will say that there's an increase in cost of 5% or 10%. If it is a fixed cost, if the problem says there is an increase in cost of 5 or 10%, if it's a fixed cost, it means this is changing, because what will change is what normally remains constant. So if question says cost is increasing by 10%, if it's a variable cost, then the variable cost per unit is increasing, and if it's a fixed cost, then the total fixed cost is increasing, because what can change is what normally remains constant, because this does not remain constant. So if question says fixed cost increase by 10%, does not mean fixed cost per unit will increase by 10%, because that anyway changes, so if the question says there's an increase of 10% in fixed cost, it means there is an increase of 10% in total fixed cost. And if the question says there's an increase of 10% in variable cost, it means there's an increase in 10 percentage of variable cost per unit. What normally remains constant can only change. What normally remains constant can only change. Example, or first write, before example write, change in cost, change in cost, change in cost, any change in fixed cost, any change in fixed cost would mean change in, any change in fixed cost change in would mean change in total fixed cost, would mean change in total fixed cost. If question says there's a change in fixed cost, it means there's a change in total fixed cost. And any change in variable cost would mean change in variable cost per unit, would mean change in variable cost per unit. Basically what normally remains constant can only change. Semi variable cost I cannot give any notes, because that the question has to clearly mention what is changing. Fixed and variable, we can say if there is a change, it means a change in total fixed cost, and it means a change in variable cost per unit. What normally remains constant can only undergo a change. What normally remains constant can only undergo change. Now example, cost for 10,000 units is rupees 1 lakh. Cost for 10,000 units rupees 1 lakh. Production for next year 15,000 units. Production for next year 15,000 units. Increase in fixed cost 5%, increase in variable cost 10%, increase in fixed cost 5%, increase in variable cost 10%. Current fixed cost for 10,000 units, current fixed cost 10,000 units in bracket included in 1 lakh is equal to rupees 60,000. Current fixed cost for 10,000 units included in that 1 lakh, included in that 1 lakh is rupees 60,000. What will be the cost for 15,000 units? What will be the cost for 15,000 units? Just go through this example, then I'll explain. Cost for 10,000 units 1 lakh. production for next year is 15,000 units. There's an increase in fixed cost of 5%. There's an increase in variable cost of 10%. Current fixed cost is 60,000. What will be the cost for 15,000 units? Okay, now I have the cost for the last year, which is 1 lakh rupee. The production for the next year is 15,000 units. So when production goes up, naturally the cost will go up. But we cannot say 10,000 units is equal to 1 lakh, 15,000 units is equal to 1 lakh 50,000. That relationship will not work, because an organization can have fixed cost as well as variable cost. For Bharadwaj Institute, if you are spending on 10 students 1 lakh rupee, 20 students will not spend 2 lakh rupees, because there is a variable component and there is a fixed component. Apart from that, there is also an increase which is happening in the cost. Any increase in fixed cost mean increase in total fixed cost. Any increase in fixed cost would mean increase in total fixed cost. Any increase in variable cost would mean increase in variable cost per unit. So next year 15,000 units will be manufactured by the company. I'll have to calculate what is the total cost. First let's analyze the fixed cost part of it, then we'll analyze the variable cost part of it. Fixed cost, give the heading fixed cost. Last year fixed cost is equal to, last year fixed cost is equal to, how much the last year fixed cost? Sorry, 60,000. Last year fixed cost is 60,000. In my example I've given in the second line, last year fixed cost is rupees 60,000. Now whenever I'm analyzing fixed cost, I just want to know the total fixed cost. Some question what they'll do is they'll say last year fixed cost is 6 rupees per unit. If they give you per unit, your first job is to convert that into a overall fixed cost, because what I need is the overall fixed cost and not the per unit fixed cost. Current year fixed cost is equal to, current year fixed cost is equal to, current year fixed cost is equal to, will ideally get the same 60,000 only unless there are changes, because output goes up, output comes down, fixed costs do not change. Only thing is the question has mentioned about some change. What is the change they mentioned? How much? 5%. So 60,000 plus 5%. 60,000 plus 5%. Current year fixed cost 60,000 plus 5%. It will become 63,000. Any change in fixed cost would have to be applied on the total fixed cost. Any change in fixed cost would have to be applied on the total fixed cost. Clear? Any doubts on this? I took the last year fixed cost, added the 5% on top of that and got the number. If they give you fixed cost per unit, don't apply the change on that. For example, if the same question had said 6 per unit, if you apply 6 plus 5%, it will become 6.3, and then you will multiply with 15,000 units, you will get a different answer. 6.3 into 15,000 will give you a different answer, because any change in fixed cost would have to be applied only to the total fixed cost. If you get the per unit number, I can say 60,000 R last year, 6 per unit. This is the last year number, but the 6 per unit is of no use. The 6 per unit is of no use, because if you apply on 6 rupees, you will then multiply with 15,000 units, because next year the units have gone up. But the only thing is my rent cost does not change whether I have 100 students or 50 students or 20 students. So only time when rent will change is if the landlord increases the rent portion. So in this question, the company is having an increase in maybe the rent portion. There is an increase of 5% in the rental cost. But just because output is going up, our students are going up, our rental cost cannot increase. So you cannot do 6 plus 5%. Many students end up doing 6 plus 5% in exam scenario. Here I am doing a very simple problem. Things will be very clear, but unless the concept clarity is there, you will end up making a mistake when I go to an advanced problem. Very clear logic. Whatever is the fixed cost number, you can write both in your notebook, but what matters is only 60,000. What matters is only 60,000. I am least bothered about 6 per unit. I am least bothered about 6 per unit, because if you apply 6 plus 5%, you will multiply with 15,000 units, which will give you a number called as 6.3 into 15,000 is how much? Check and let me know. 6.3 into 15,000. 94,500. So whereas I am getting the fixed cost to be 63,000, I am getting the fixed cost to be 63,000. So this will not work. So what you need to do is you will have to apply the change only on the total fixed cost and not apply the change on cost per unit. Clear? Any doubts on this? Next, variable cost. Just make one change in the question. Just make it very clear here. Last year fixed cost. This is last year fixed cost for 10,000 units. Variable cost. Friends, I think I've told you in the previous session itself that you'll have to be on time. You'll not understand any part of what I'm going to do on fixed versus variable now for the next 20-30 minutes. I've told very clearly that you'll have to be in the class by 6:30. Please don't delay your start. If you're there late, you'll not understand things because I'm starting with a complex area. I want this to be very clear. You miss out on the initial introduction, you will find it very difficult. I can't help it. Next, right, variable cost. Last year variable cost. Last year variable cost. What was the overall cost of the last year? 1 lakh. In that fixed is 60,000. In that fixed is 60,000. Variable is 40,000. This 40,000 is a misleading number. For variable cost, I want per unit number. For variable cost, I want per unit number. For fixed cost, I want overall number. Or rupees 4 per unit. Or rupees 4 per unit. What matters here is this number, and what matters here is this number. You can highlight it if you have an highlighter with you. So what matters, or carry an highlighter from the next session. Rupees 4 per unit. What matters is rupees 60,000 there, and what matters here is rupees 4 per unit, because the calculation will undergo a change accordingly. Then current year variable cost per unit. Current year variable cost per unit. Current year variable cost per unit is equal to 4 plus, how much is the increase I mentioned? 10%. 4 plus 10%. 4.40 per unit. 4.40 per unit. 4 plus 10 percentage. 4.40 per unit. Understand the difference in approach. If it was the same thing was fixed, no, I would have said 40,000 plus 10%. I would have told you to do 40,000 plus 10%. You would have got cost of 44,000. Now, variable cost for 15,000 units. For 15,000 units is equal to, variable cost for 15,000 units is equal to 4.4 into 15,000. 4.4 into 15,000. 4.4 into 15,000 was the number you get. So understand the difference in approach. For a fixed cost, I told add 5% to 60,000. If you had added 5% to 6 rupees, then you would have got overall cost as 94,500. You would have got it as 94,500. If the heading for this was variable cost, assuming this entire portion was variable cost, then the amount would have come as 94,500 and not 63,000. The amount would have come as 94,500 and not 63,000. And if this was fixed cost, amount would have come as 44,000. 40,000 plus 10%. 40,000 plus 10%, you would have got 44,000. Put together, you got a number. So understand very critically that the relationship between variable and fixed cost. Any change in variable cost means a change in variable cost per unit. Any change in fixed cost means a change in total fixed cost. Same problem, assuming they don't mention any change at all. Any change at all, no change mentioned. Still, this 1 lakh will increase. Zero change mentioned in the question, but still 1 lakh will increase. Reason is fixed cost will remain 60,000. Variable cost is 4 per unit. Now 4 will be multiplied with 15,000 units. 4 would be multiplied with 15,000 units. The cost for Bharadwaj Institute for 10 students becoming 12 will increase. Reason is our printing cost will go up, faculty cost will go up. So some of the cost will change with the volume. They are called as variable cost. Some of the costs do not change with volume. They are called as fixed cost. So if there is no increase mentioned in the question, fixed cost, total fixed cost will remain constant. Total fixed cost will remain constant, and variable cost per unit will remain constant. Variable cost per unit will remain constant, but just because you have increased the volume, total variable cost will increase. We have increased the volume, there is going to be an increase in total variable cost. Clear? Any doubts in this? All right, finally, total cost for 15,000 units. Total cost for 15,000 units is equal to 63,000 plus 66,000. 63 plus 66, 1 lakh 29,000. 1 lakh 29,000. Clear? Any doubts on this? Clear? This is a simple example for your variable cost and fixed cost. Anytime you have any doubts on variable and fixed treatment, you should see this. So this is a very simple adjustment or treatment for your variable vis-a-vis a fixed cost. This concept I would discuss 20-25 times in different problems, because I'll be doing some problem after 20-30 classes in some other chapter, and suddenly I'll say there's a change in cost. You'll have to be very clear. This is like your golden rules of accounting. Like you have golden rules of accounting, these are like golden rules of costing. Any change in variable cost means a change in variable cost per unit. Any change in fixed cost means a change in total fixed cost. Clear? Any doubts on this? Now this is one golden rule. The second golden rule is on semi-variable cost, because what I do for semi-variable cost. So for analysis purpose, I do not agree on anything as semi-variable. That is, whatever they give semi-variable, I'll have to split that into variable and fixed somehow. I'll have to break it up into variable and fixed. For example, if this question just gives you this information saying cost for 10,000 is 1 lakh and it says it is a semi-variable cost, I need to somehow split this into variable and fixed. Without splitting into variable and fixed, I cannot do the analysis which I have done below. My analysis cannot be done unless you give me the breakup of variable and fixed. This question they gave a breakup saying last year fixed cost is 60,000, balance was variable. Some way the breakup has to be given. Some problem the breakup would not be given. You will have to compute the breakup. But I cannot work with an item called a semi-variable cost, because semi-variable cost does not help me in doing my analysis. So for analysis purpose, this semi-variable cost has to be broken down, into variable and fixed using some ways. Your ICAI material talks about 5 different methods, but in all problems we'll follow one method. I'll first explain that method. Other methods I'll just discuss from your ICAI material. But what predominantly worked is only one method of splitting. Next, it's the same question, splitting of semi-variable cost into fixed cost and variable cost. Splitting of semi-variable cost into fixed cost and variable cost. Splitting of semi-variable cost into fixed cost and variable cost. You can first write the formula. Semi-variable cost per unit is equal to semi-variable cost per unit is equal to change in total cost, change in total cost divided by change in units, change in total cost divided by change in units. This is another golden rule which we have to follow. Like you have your golden rules of accounting, these are like golden rules of costing. Change in total cost divided by change in units. Or you call it as variable cost, not semi-variable cost. Call it as variable cost per unit. Variable cost per unit is equal to change in total cost by change in units. Change in total cost by change in units. Variable cost per unit. Semi-variable cost is equal to semi-variable cost is equal to total fixed cost plus total variable cost. Total fixed cost plus total variable cost. Using the above equation, we can compute total fixed cost. We can compute total fixed cost. I'll first give an example, there only you will understand it. As of now, things will not be clear. Using the above equation, we can compute total fixed cost. Basic rule is whatever you give a semi-variable, I want to convert that into variable and fixed. I cannot work with an item called semi-variable cost because that is not something which is going to help me in doing my analysis properly. Now write example. Cost for 10,000 units, rupees 1 lakh. Cost for 10,000 units, rupees 1 lakh. Cost for 15,000 units, rupees 1,20,000. 10,000 units is 1 lakh. 15,000 units is 1,20,000. Okay, now coming to this example, first let's understand whether it is semi-variable, fixed or variable, because whenever you give a figure, because two numbers needs to be given, the overall number is not same. If the overall number is not same, it is not a fixed cost. If the overall number is not same, it is not a fixed cost, because fixed cost total, if you say cost for 10,000 units 1 lakh, 15,000 units 1 lakh, 20,000 units 1 lakh, then it is a fixed cost. The fixed cost by nature has to remain same. Divide 1 lakh divided by 10,000 is how much? Divide and tell me what is the number. 10 per unit, and divide this 15,000. Divide, tell me, guys, please participate. Guys, start doing calculation. So 10 per unit and 8 per unit. You'll have to have a calculator. Please start doing calculation now onwards. 10 per unit and 8 per unit. This cannot be a variable cost because variable cost per unit remains constant. Variable cost per unit remains constant. Semi-variable cost, I said, semi-variable cost per unit does not remain constant. Total semi-variable cost does not remain constant. Semi-variable cost per unit does not remain constant. total semi-variable cost does not remain constant. So unfortunately, this example, the overall cost is also not same and the per unit cost is also not same, which means this is a semi-variable cost, which means this is a semi-variable cost. A semi-variable cost is one where the per unit cost as well as the total cost both do not remain constant. Per unit cost as well as the total cost both do not remain constant. Clear? Any doubts on this? Here 1 lakh, if it was same 1 lakh, then it is a fixed cost. 10 rupees, same. How it could have become same 10 rupees is if this was 1 lakh 50, 10 per unit, it's a variable cost. Then it is a variable cost. Unfortunately, neither this 1 lakh and 120 is remaining same, nor 10 and 8 is remaining same. So this is a semi-variable cost. Whenever we have semi-variable, I have to find out how much is variable in this, how much is fixed in this. And what I want is variable cost per unit. I don't want total variable cost. I don't want total, because in this total variable cost will be different, in this total variable cost will be different, because total variable cost changes with output. The total variable cost is going to change with output. 10,000 units, you'll say total variable cost is 40,000 rupees, just random number I'm saying. 15,000 units, you'll say 80,000 rupees. I don't want that. I want what is the variable cost per unit. I also want to know what is the total fixed cost. Basically, we are trying to find an item which will normally remain constant, Once that is identified, the question says find out cost for some other number. We can calculate that. You will understand this. Now write compute semi-variable cost or compute cost for 18,000 units. Compute cost for 18,000 units. Compute cost for 18,000 units. See, if this was 1 lakh for 10,000, 1 lakh for 15,000, answer is 1 lakh for 18,000 if it's a fixed cost. If it's a fixed cost, 1 lakh for 10,000 units, 1 lakh for 15,000 units, 1 lakh for even 18,000 units. If it was 10 per unit for 10,000, 10 per unit for 15,000, then it will be 10 per unit even for 18,000. So 10 into 18,000 is the answer. 10 into 18,000. Unfortunately, neither the overall number is remaining same nor the per unit number is remaining same. So now write variable cost per unit is equal to variable cost per unit is equal to variable cost per unit is equal to change in cost, change in total cost by change in units. 1,20,000 minus 1 lakh, that is a change. 1,20,000 minus 1 lakh, the two examples which I have given, 1,20,000 minus 1 lakh divided by 15,000 minus 10,000. 15,000 minus 10,000. 120 minus 1 lakh, 15,000 minus 10,000. How much the variable cost per unit? 4 per unit. Now what we can use with this 4 per unit is, I can say for 18,000 units, the cost is 4 into 18,000. That is the variable part. I'll also have to get the fixed cost. We'll have to get the fixed part. Cost for 18,000 units is 4 into 18,000 plus something. That plus something we'll have to get. We have got the variable component because the semi-variable cost has a variable component as well as a fixed component. Next, semi-variable cost is equal to semi-variable cost for 10,000 units is equal to, you can take any number, okay, you can take 15,000 or 10,000. Semi-variable cost for 10,000 units is equal to variable cost for 10,000 units plus fixed cost for 10,000 units. Semi-variable cost for 10,000 units is equal to variable cost for 10,000 units plus fixed cost for 10,000 units. You can take even this for 15,000. You can do this calculation at 15,000. You can do this calculation at 10,000, any one level. Now, what does semi-variable cost for 10,000 units mean? Semi-variable cost is this number, because we decided this to be a semi-variable cost. We decided this number to be a semi-variable cost, or you can say this as total cost for 10,000. You can even use the word total cost for 10,000 units is equal to variable cost for 10,000 units plus fixed cost for 10,000 units. You can even use this word also. So I can say now 1 lakh is equal to 10,000 into 4 plus fixed cost. Fixed cost is balancing figure. 10,000 into 4 plus fixed cost. 10,000 into 4. 4 rupees is what you decided in your earlier calculation. 4 per unit was the number we got in the earlier computation. So 10,000 into 4 is the variable cost. Fixed cost is balancing figure. Fixed cost is balancing figure. How much is the fixed cost? This is the fixed cost for 10,000 units. This is the fixed cost for 12,000 units. This is the fixed cost for 15,000 units. This is the fixed cost for 18,000 units. This is the fixed cost for any units, because fixed cost by nature is going to remain constant. Fixed cost by nature is going to remain constant, whether you call it as for 10,000 units or 20,000 units or 1 lakh unit or 2 lakh unit or 5 lakh unit. This is what the number is going to be. Another approach, you need not write this. Assuming I was to take 15,000 units for calculation purpose. Semi-variable cost for 15,000 is equal to variable cost for 15,000, fixed cost for 15,000, 1,20,000 is equal to 15,000 into 4 plus fixed cost, balancing figure, same 60,000 you will get. Balancing figure, same 60,000 you will get. Not only this, if they give you another level, 20,000, same equation you follow, fixed cost you will get only same 60,000. If you are getting a different answer, somewhere calculation error has happened. Somewhere you have done a calculation mistake. Otherwise, wherever you substitute, you are going to get fixed cost is only 60,000. Fixed cost is only 60,000. This is total fixed cost. This is total fixed cost, not per unit fixed cost. Variable cost, I wanted the per unit number. Fixed cost, I want the overall number. I want the overall number. Why I said fixed cost for 10,000 units here? Because I wanted to show you that whether you take 10,000 units or 15,000 units or 20,000 units or 1 lakh unit, the fixed cost number will be 60,000. Fixed cost number is going to be 60,000. Write this also now below. 15,000 units. They have given only 10 and 15,000. Sometimes 3 different activity level will be given, 4 different, doesn't matter. This is how I'll calculate the variable cost per unit and the total fixed cost, which is 60,000. Any doubts on this? Now I can say cost for 18,000 units is equal to variable cost for 18,000 units plus fixed cost for 18,000 units. Cost for 18,000 units is equal to variable cost plus fixed cost. Cost for 18,000 units is equal to variable cost for 18,000 units plus fixed cost for 18,000 units. What are the variable cost we have calculated? Guys, participate. Very simple question. What is the variable cost we have calculated? I want you guys to talk. Variable cost is 4 per unit. So 18,000 into 4. 18,000 into 4. What is the fixed cost we have calculated? That is the answer for 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, 18,000, 25,000, 30,000. Whatever output you take, fixed cost rent is only 60,000, irrespective of the number of students. Plus 60,000. How much is this? 1,32,000. Or can you divide by per unit? Can you divide by 18,000? 7 point. This per unit is not needed. I'm just doing it here. To explain something. Per unit is not needed as such. 132 or 7.33 per unit. 1,32,000 or 7.33 per unit. This per unit is technically not needed. Just to explain some concept, I'm doing it. Basically, you see here, originally it was 10 per unit, then it became 8 per unit. Now it has become 7.33 per unit, which means it is a semi-variable cost. A semi-variable cost is one which is not going to remain constant at overall level. It is also not going to remain constant at per unit level. Our job is to somehow split this, the semi-variable cost into variable and fixed, Clear? Any doubts on this?